Hi, this is David at TED-IELTS, and today I want to talk to you about IELTS writing. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the idea of simplicity and complexity to explain why many people fail to get the band score they want in the IELTS exam. As always, this video is divided into chapters, which you can find down below. You can use these to guide your studies by jumping forwards and backwards to the most useful parts, but I do recommend watching the whole thing. Also, there are subtitles that you can use if you struggle to understand everything that I say. Okay, let's begin today's lesson. The IELTS band descriptors and all the advice given by the people at IELTS, IDP, and the British Council say the same things over and over. Just read the question and write a direct answer in straightforward English. Yet, for some reason, people insist upon writing incredibly contrived essays that are hard to read and which typically earn very low band scores. It is incredibly frustrating to IELTS examiners the world over that the vast majority of essays they encounter are written in the same mode. That is to say, they are crammed full of obscure vocabulary and difficult grammatical structures, with confusing ideas and bizarre cohesive devices. There are various reasons for this misunderstanding, but primarily it comes from the mystery that exists around IELTS and the fraudulent or unqualified teachers who give advice online and in training schools around the world. The result of this is that the majority of IELTS candidates attempt to write very complicated essays in the hope of somehow impressing the examiners. As you might imagine, this approach invariably backfires, resulting in a low score, which makes the student take the exam again and again, writing increasingly complicated essays in a futile attempt to boost their score. This is great news for IELTS training schools, which can simply tell candidates things like you didn't use enough advanced vocabulary and then take more money from them as they continue to give out bad advice. But it's bad news for people like you. In the end, people's dreams are crushed because they have listened to the wrong advice and taken the wrong methods. When I say complicated, I mean that the essay is overly complex. In other words, it is not sophisticated, but rather is needlessly confusing. An overly complex or complicated IELTS essay could suffer from various problems. It could have too many paragraphs, and these could be too long or contain too many ideas. It could have ridiculously obscure or archaic words that no one uses or that don't even mean what the writer intended. Oftentimes the sentences are too long or the grammar is unnecessarily difficult. The problem with all of this is that it tends to result in writing that is just not good. People who try to write very complex essays typically use language or structures that they don't understand, and this just makes them make lots of mistakes. As I mentioned in the previous chapter, they do this because they've been lied to by people who say advanced language guarantees a good score. This shows a lack of basic common sense. After all, that's not how any language functions. Whilst complicated ideas, structures, and language can be used correctly, there's no language in the world where you can just pluck random words from the dictionary, combine them into an immensely long sentence, and end up generating a wonderful piece of writing. In many cases, language is better when it's simple, but let's see whether that is always the best approach. Thus far, I have talked about the dangers of overly complicated essays, which suggests that simple ones are the best. But is it always better to write a very simple essay? In a manner of speaking, simple is usually better. When it comes to language, we can express our ideas more clearly when they are formed with words and structures that are easy to understand. Many great books and speeches nowadays are written or delivered in deliberately simple, accessible ways, because that ensures better communication. However, you do have to be careful not to use language that is too simple. If our words and grammatical structures are too basic, they will not communicate ideas effectively. Instead of conveying an accurate meaning, they will only convey part of that meaning. Thus, it is quite obvious that a good essay must have some degree of complexity. If your ideas are very basic and your language is too simple, you will not fulfill many of the criteria for the IELTS band descriptors. Which then raises the question, is it better to aim for simple or complex essays? Most IELTS candidates think about complexity rather than simplicity because they want to impress the examiners and get a high band score. Thus, they become obsessed with so-called advanced vocabulary and academic transitional devices, etc. As I have made abundantly clear, this is a terrible approach to IELTS and to language in general. Whilst I have shown that writing essays that are too simple is also problematic, it would certainly be more beneficial to take the approach of simplifying your work in order to get a high score. Whether your current level is 5, 6, 7 or 8, most candidates would stand to improve a little by aiming for a simplification of their work. The reason is that most people understandably strive for better language, yet by doing this they make mistakes. If they used language that they completely understood, they would have fewer mistakes and therefore get a better score. As long as they don't go too far in this approach, it would definitely be beneficial. However, there is one thing that you should consider above any matter of simplicity or complexity, and that is accuracy. Above all else, accuracy is king when it comes to IELTS. For all parts of the band descriptors, you would get a perfect score if you were completely accurate. If your essay fully answered the question with a perfect structure and your ideas flawlessly linked, with your words all correct in meaning and spelling, and your sentences grammatically perfect, you would get an overall band 9. Of course, not everyone is capable of perfect accuracy, and so it is worth balancing the simple and the complex in search of the most accurate meaning you can present. Instead of dazzling the examiner with a very long sentence or obscure word, give them a sentence made of words that provide a clear meaning that cannot be misunderstood. That is the easiest way to get a high band score. I know that the information in this video seems to go against the majority of IELTS advice, but if you struggle to believe me, then go and find another highly qualified tutor or look at the resources made by people that organize the IELTS exam. You'll notice the same thing. They all agree that success in IELTS writing is a matter of producing straightforward essays that use accurate language to present concrete ideas. No one with any credibility seriously argues for needless complexity. Sadly, though, a whole industry has arisen that takes advantage of desperate people and feeds them terrible ideas that ensure their failure. But let's break free of that. There are plenty of good teachers and great resources out there. Ignore anyone who issues false promises or talks about tricks and shortcuts. They'll just lead you back into that depressing cycle. Instead, remember that IELTS is an English test and that English is a language. It sounds, well, simple, right? In a sense, it is. No one said that it would be easy, but it's a lot easier when you stop trying to make it so complicated. Remember that, and you'll put yourself on track for a better score in your next IELTS test.